Welcome to the Unit 2 review. I'm going to go through a Word document that is also at the website, so make sure that you have this, or at least write some of this stuff down as you're paying attention, because it's definitely going to help for the test. How I'm going to do this, instead of typing this all out, which I've already done, so you can thank me some other time, I'm just going to go through and click the redo instead of undo. I'm clicking the redo button, so things are going to come up pretty quickly, so if you need to pause it at any time. So first property of water we'll talk about is adhesion. And again, we've talked about this before, but the ability to stick to other molecules or surfaces. An example that we used in class was talking about capillary action, how water goes up to the top of the tallest trees. It's able to climb up those teeny tiny tubes. Cohesion, another one. And this is again the ability for water to stick to itself. And this is forming actually liquid water instead of water being just a vapor, a gas. Surface tension, this goes back to the Cheerio demo that I did. Basically the definition you could say is its ability to resist other forces. In other words, putting a Cheerio on top, it's able to resist that force and kind of push back up on it. So things are going to float on water and also helping to form drops, raindrops. But cohesion and surface tension both having to do with that. Neutral pH, guys, really there's nothing to it. Water's neutral, and that means it's around 7. So that's all you need to know. Less dense as ice. Again, we talked about how ice floats because it's less dense than water. This is unique for water to be less dense as a solid. And again, going back to bodies of water not freezing all the way through, there's ice forming at the top, heat coming up from the bottom so they don't become ice cubes, and all living things in water, at least small bodies of water, don't freeze and die every year. Most important of all of them, because it basically gives all of these makes all these properties exist, is polarity. And again, that goes back to the single water molecule, how it has a slightly negative oxygen and slightly positive hydrogens. Those are the partial charges that you saw in your notes. Kind of look like little figure 8 signs. And the importance for polarity, among other things, besides that it gives all these properties existence, is that it can dissolve many other molecules. Its polarity makes it a good solvent. Other things to know about water, don't forget the hydrogen bonds that you saw in the diagrams that we've done, polar covalent bonds that you saw, and these polar covalent bonds are within the water molecule holding those two hydrogens to an oxygen. Hydrogen bonds are between water molecules, one water to another. So make sure you look over those diagrams that you have seen a couple times already. Lipids. I'm going to skip to the last macromolecule just if it fits better on the Word document. So lipids are created by a condensation reaction. And what I want to do really quick is to show you how that works, even though I've given you some websites and stuff to check out. But right here we have a glycerol molecule. Okay, and I just highlighted in red, or put a rectangle in red there, so that you can see it when it gets transplanted onto our Word document. But let me just kind of show you what's happening here. This is how a condensation reaction works. Here's a fatty acid tail that is saturated. It's full of CH2s. There are no double bonds in the tail. There's a double bond up here by the O, but that's not part of the tail of CH2s. Alright, so this fatty acid comes over, and literally what happens is that the H from this OH group on top and the OH group right here, it's actually the OH group up here and the H from down here, but this makes it easier for me to show you, come off. This fatty acid attaches right there. I'm going to scoot it over just a little bit to make room. So here's what happens. A water molecule comes out. HOH, H2O, there's a water molecule. Comes out. And let's stick another one of these things on here. Bring it over. Oops. I'll have to get kind of close. Here's an H. And an OH. Come out. So this guy can now stick to that guy right there. Notice this one is unsaturated or monounsaturated because of the double bond here shown in red. So let's drag one more of these things over here. These are all just condensation reactions, spitting out of water. And again, I'm just going to scoot this one over. Okay, ordinarily it would be just like the first example I showed you, but I don't have room to move all these in there. So water comes out. So this oxygen and this carbon need something to bind to, so they're available to bind to each other. So here's a triglyceride, a glycerol head, bunch of C's and H's, and 3 fatty acid tails. This one is saturated here on the left. The one in the middle here is unsaturated. And the one on the right is polyunsaturated because it has 2 or more double bonds, in this case 2. Alright, back to our Word document. The 2 main types of lipids we talked about, phospholipids and triglycerides. Again, these will become really important when we talk about cells, but you at least have to know some of their structure now. And triglycerides that I just showed you being made, but these are both made the same way, just adding 2 tails instead of 3. But essentially the same thing. Are these polymers? I even made this as big as possible. And then I changed it to red. Oops, let me go back. Guys, these are not polymers. Lipids are the macromolecules that are not polymers. The other 3 are. These are not polymers. They're not made by piecing together small pieces. What you saw here were 3 big chunks being added one at a time, or 3 at a time. But if this were a polymer being made by little monomers, it'd be more like this: adding a CH2, and then adding another CH2, and then adding another CH2. Okay, this would be making it like a polymer is made, but this is not how this is made. These are made in big chunks. They're not made by putting little pieces together. All the little pieces are already added. They're just put on all at once. Boom, one big chunk. So not little pieces coming together to make a big piece. They're already big pieces. They're already pretty big molecules themselves. So similarities between these 2 guys. And I merge the cells. Has a polar head and non-polar fatty acid tails. They both contain a glycerol molecule as the backbone. That's where the tails attach. That's what you saw here. Similar thing going on with the phospholipid. There's a glycerol backbone, and that's where the fatty acid tails attach. Differences, pretty simple. Phospholipids, 2 fatty acid tails. Oops. Triglycerides, 3 fatty acid tails. There's your hint. Try 3. Alright, and then I pasted on here a phospholipid. And I'm not going to label these on here, but you should have this on your worksheet. This top part above the dashed line here, above the dotted line, this is the polar or hydrophilic end. So down here you can write in polar. Hydrophilic and polar are talking about the same thing, which is attracted to water. And down here on the bottom, below the dashed line, are the hydrophobic fatty acid tails. Hydrophobic, aka nonpolar. You also want to label the glycerol, saturated, unsaturated, and polyunsaturated tails. In this case, glycerol is just up here in the head. This is a phosphate head, but it also has a glycerol down here to attach to for these fatty acid tails to attach. If you see one that is straight, in other words, this one's going straight up and down, that is saturated, typically. And when you see one kink in the chain, that is typically an unsaturated. If you were to see 2 kinks or something, if you could see the double bonds in here or the lack of hydrogens, you'd be able to see why they are polyunsaturated. But in this case, we have a saturated and an unsaturated fatty acid tail. Then I pasted in here a triglyceride and fit it to the picture. So again, above the dashed line is our glycerol head, which is hydrophilic, aka polar, both meaning attracted to water. And down here the fatty acid tails, which Guys, keep in mind these just bent and this straight fatty acid tail are still made up of CH2s. I just didn't put them in there. Okay, so when you see these fatty acid tails and a phospholipid, it's still CH2s ending with a CH3. I just didn't put them in there. Okay, if you want, you could just draw in little zigzags, because remember the zigzags are the same thing as CH2, CH2, CH2. And again, for this one's probably better for labeling purposes. Saturated fatty acid here on the left again, unsaturated in the middle, and polyunsaturated because it has two double bonds. You can see them in red. Polyunsaturated fatty acid. So when you see these fatty acid tails, this is the hydrophobic, for both of these, hydrophobic part of the molecules, not attracted to water. They actually will repel water. Just like how you saw in the wax paper demonstration, wax is a lipid, okay, that is repelling water. It's not attracted to it. Function for both of these, slightly different. Primarily, phospholipids are in charge of creating the cell membrane. We'll get into way more detail with those pretty soon. Oops. And for the triglycerides, long-term energy storage, also provide insulation, as I talked about in class, something like a walrus that has inches of blubber that is, swimming around in super cold water, and protection as well, surviving attacks from predators. But all these things also apply to us. Long-term energy storage, insulation, and protection for our bodies as well. Oops, sorry. This is talking about protection of organs and bones for you, but you get the idea. Alright, then I started formatting things because it got a little out of control. Alright, so going down to the next section, polymers, and that's where I'm going to finish this part and pick up with part 2.